Welcome to the Candidate Forum for Sacramento City Council District 2. The candidates in alphabetical order are Roger Dickinson and Stephen Walton. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and the Sacramento Metro Cable Television Commission. I am Lexi Tesh, a member of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and the moderator for this forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men. We work at the local, state, and national level to encourage informed and active participation in government. The League does not support or oppose political candidates or parties. However, we take positions on legislation, ballot measures, and we speak out on governmental issues informed by our studies and positions. If you are interested in public policy or just want to support our volunteer work, we invite you to join us. The League is open to everyone. The format for this forum will be as follows. Candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. They will have 2 minutes to answer questions in rotating order. Finally, speakers will have 1 minute for a closing statement. The timer is League volunteer Paula Lee. Paula will give you the sign for 30 seconds left and the stop sign. We will begin with an opening statement from Stephen Walton.
Thank you, Lexi. I want to say good morning and thank you for all the viewers that are viewing this morning. My name is Stephen Walton and I'm running for Sacramento City Council in District 2 because our district has been neglected for far too long. For far too many years, we've went without the resources that we rightfully deserve, and it's time for that to truly change. We need to revitalize and restore District 2 to a healthy and whole position, and I want to bring effective leadership that will ensure that our voices are heard throughout the community. We all know the struggles of living in a district that has oftentimes felt forgotten. We don't receive the basic resources that we deserve and need, like waste management or road repair or public safety. That hasn't kept up with our needs. It's time for us to come together and collaborate and have a fighting voice at City Council that will ensure we get the level of service that we deserve at the level and standard that we truly deserve throughout the district. Now, while my opponent has held office in the district, it's crystal clear that politics as usual is not what we need to bring about true transformative change in this district. We need effective leadership because doing things the same old way has not worked in our district. So we need to collaborate and work in concert. You need a leader, and we need a leader that works alongside of us, not above us, to bring about transformative change in this district. My family and my foundation come from being in the district for nearly 90 years. I've watched it and I've lived the struggles that we all experience. I see the challenges that we face on a daily basis, but I also see our amazing potential. We need someone who understands what we're going through as a district and who has the right strategies, fresh ideas, and effective leadership to bring about positive transformational change. With your support, I will work tirelessly to make sure we can create a District 2 that we all can be proud of. Thank you.
Now we will hear an opening statement from Roger Dickinson.
Well, first, thank you for the League of Women Voters hosting this forum, and to Metro Cable 14 for telecasting it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm proud, along with my wife Marge, to have been North Sacramento residents continuously since 1978, and I'm proud to have had the distinction of representing North Sacramento both for almost 17 years as a member of the County Board of Supervisors, and then for another 4 in the State Assembly. We have a district that, unfortunately, over the last half dozen to 10 years has been forgotten, neglected, overlooked, and not received the resources that it deserves. While we have enormous potential in our district and great assets, what we've been lacking is leadership. We've tried electing people who haven't held office, and that has brought us not the kind of attention and resources that we need, but quite the opposite, a disinvestment in our part of the city. We can do better, simply put. And I hope and believe I can use the relationships that I've built over the years with both elected officials and appointed officials at the local, state, and federal levels, the experience I've gained putting coalitions together to accomplish the results that improve communities, and the knowledge of where to go to get the money we need to bring those resources to our part of the city. In fact, I'm already at work with the City Council and with the city staff to create a financing mechanism that will allow us to raise money to invest in infrastructure so badly needed in so many parts of our district. It's the kind of work that needs to be done in order to bring the kinds of improvements and the uplifting, the economic investment, and the strengthening of our neighborhoods, the increase of public safety that we need and deserve in our part of Sacramento.
Now we will move on to the questions which were solicited in advance from the community. For the first question, we will start with you, Stephen. Question 1. Being effective and getting things done requires a city council member to have knowledge of city functions, have relationships with city officials and the community, and have meaningful ideas to address our city's challenges. What are your strengths and weaknesses in this regard?
Well, it does require having relationships and understanding how things work at City Hall and working in collaboration with constituents. We never want to leave out the residents of the community. And so working with the city staff and directors in the city is absolutely essential to receiving the level of services that we desire. I've been doing so for the past several years in working and to clean up the bike trail for once. That involves working with the director of the parks, because many don't know that the bike trail is actually governed by the parks. And so understanding who we go to for services is very important. I think it's important not only to know who's at the level of, who's serving us at the city at different levels, whether it be directors or assistant city managers, and understanding their function. We also need to understand as a community who's serving us and who we directly relate to. I understand how that works, but also I understand the necessity of the city council member to be a bridge for the residents to city services. That's my strength, is making sure that people understand some things that can be complicated and bringing it down to a level that we all can understand and utilize, because we're all in the district contributing our tax dollars, and we should be seeing a return on our investment. And so that's one of my biggest strengths, is making sure people understand the vehicle of city services and understand the city representative of how we act as a bridge to those services. And it's not an oversimplification, but it's a really an understanding of how we utilize services. And that's what I'll bring to the table and continue to work on, as I've been doing for the past several years. And in results, we see the results that effective leadership has when you actually involve the people and those who are serving at the city level.
Great. Roger?
This is a critical issue for us in our part of the city, because our representatives in recent years, frankly, haven't had the relationships, haven't had the knowledge, haven't had the experience to get the kinds of assets and resources and the attention that we need and deserve in our part of the city to take advantage of the potential that we've had. Now, over the years, I'm happy to say that I've been extremely involved in getting those kinds of results for North Sacramento during the time I served in office, and even before. For example, bringing light rail transit to North Sacramento in the 1980s, making sure that we built new housing at Del Paso Nuevo, which then Council Member Rob Kurth and I succeeded in getting $10 million from the federal government to start. Establishing Birth and Beyond, a home visitation support program for at-risk families so that they could avoid slipping into child abuse and neglect. Helping move the Urban League headquarters from South Sacramento to Del Paso Heights. And speaking of the Sacramento Northern Bike Trail, I was one of those who got the bike trail established in the first place and have planted trees along that bike trail as a member of the Sacramento Tree Foundation Board of Directors over the years. It's using the relationships we've built, it's using the knowledge we've gained in order to be able to mobilize the resources necessary in concert with the community. It's working with the community to realize these kinds of additions, improvements, and resources that we need. I'm proud to have a record of having accomplished so many things that have made our community better, but it also informs me that there's so much more that we can do.
For question 2, we will start with you, Roger. The number of unhoused individuals continues to grow. We know this requires multifaceted and budget-driven solutions at all levels of government. What are your short and long-term solutions? Should the homeless be sent to our jails?
Well, let's answer that first part, that last part first, and take it easily. We don't do ourselves any good by criminalizing homelessness. What we need to do, and what I have published as a 6-point plan previously, is the path that we can take to reduce homelessness. And I'm happy to have worked on reducing homelessness within former Mayor Heather Fargo in the early 2000s, when in fact we were bringing homelessness down. But what we need to do are the 6 things at least. First is we need to clean up our streets and parkways and attack illegal dumping in our part of the community. Second, we need to prioritize resources to prevent those at risk from losing their housing. We won't ever reduce homelessness without stemming the flow of those who become homeless. We need to collaborate with the county to expand mental health and addiction treatment and encourage the county, for example, to aggressively go after Proposition 1 money to expand behavioral health services. I'm pleased to say I've already talked with some of the supervisors about doing that, and they're very interested in making sure that happens. We need to work with community, business, and faith leaders and organizations to reduce homelessness, something that Mayor Heather Fargo and I did in assembling a task force to help us address homelessness in the early and mid-2000s. We need to make sure the state provides certain and predictable funding to reduce homelessness. Again, I'm proud and pleased to say I have relationships with those at the state level who can make sure that that occurs. And finally, speaking to the long term, we need to expand housing, both affordable and market rate housing, not just in North Sacramento, where we do need more housing for sure, but throughout our community. That will help us bring down the cost of housing, create more housing opportunities, and help those who are on the street get off the street into transitional and permanent supportive housing.
Stephen?
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Of course. The number of unhoused individuals continues to grow. We know this requires multifaceted and budget-driven solutions at all levels of government. What are your short and long-term solutions? Should the homeless be sent to our jail?
I want to definitely take care of the last part of the question and move that out of the way. The homeless should not be sent to jail. That is not a solution. What we want to do in District 2 is, and throughout the city, we want to really increase shelter capacity really in areas that don't include District 2, because District 2 really houses nearly half of the shelter capacity already. So we want to increase shelter capacity, places where our unhoused community can go. But then we also want to create and provide accessibility to mental health resources, as well as drug abuse or treatment programs that are accessible in the district. I've found that when you provide things that are accessible in this manner to the unhoused community, and it comes from trusted sources, you really make a difference in them accepting those resources. So we have to be able to provide public and private partnerships that provide these resources so that it's accessible in the community. Also, there are some unhoused in the unhoused community that just have fallen on hard times. And just maybe have lost a job. We need to have strong vocational and job training programs that get them right back in the workforce, and we need to be intentional about that. I tell the story that September 20th, people working together along with Grant Union High School held an amazing event with the building trades, not only for the students of Grant High School, but for the community to come and understand how we get back to working at livable wage jobs. We want to make sure that the unhoused community has access to that vocational training as well. In addition to that, we need to make sure we're preserving public health and safety along the way, so we can answer and solve this crisis that is a regional issue in a holistic manner. And so I want to make sure we're partnering regionally because this is a regional issue. So we need regional resources. And I've been working to do so for the past several years with multiple layers of government, starting from the federal all the way to the state and the local levels.
For question 3, we'll start with you, Stephen. What would you do to reduce the carbon footprint of city activities significantly and quickly?
So we need to increase our tree canopy in the district, and we need to provide, in addition to that, because if you compare District 2 to other areas in the city of trees, we lack a healthy tree canopy. In addition to that, we need to provide accessibility to public transportation. We don't have that. And knocking doors throughout the community, you hear all the time, if it was accessible, I would use it. It's not accessible. And while the light rail was brought to the community, it's not accessible to the community in ways that we have bus routes getting us to there, or just an adequate bus service to and from the actual service stations in the community. And so we need to make sure we make public transportation accessible in the community. That will make us less car dependent. Right now, we're still car dependent, and we will continue to be until we make public transportation accessible.
Roger.
Again, I'm very happy to say that this is an area I've worked on extensively, both as a member of the Board of Supervisors and in the state legislature, including carrying legislation which made the Green Building Code, supported by the U.S. Green Building Council, into the state's building code. Now, what that means is that our new construction meets standards that are designed to reduce the carbon footprint of each structure that's built. That's an important step because the built environment is responsible for about 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG emissions. I've also been very active on the transportation front. In addition to making sure that we got light rail in our part of the city, I've worked over the years as a member of the Regional Transit Board to make sure that we improve bus service, not just in our part of the city, but throughout the region. That does provide an alternative. I am very proud to have been the lead in having the County of Sacramento adopt a climate action plan and join the Chicago Climate Exchange, which led to the county actually reducing its GHG emissions. We need to do more in the transportation sector. It's responsible for nearly 40% of our GHG emissions, and that means helping people move to zero-emission vehicles. Now, in order to do that, we have to expand our charging infrastructure throughout the community, because it's not reasonable to expect people to move to a zero-emission vehicle if they have no place to charge it. So I've worked on legislation to make sure that multifamily residences and other areas of the community have charging capability so that people can have confidence that that's available. And when it comes to actually planting trees and increasing our tree canopy, I agree with Stephen very much on this point. We are under-canopied in our part of the city and most lower-income parts of the city. That's why I've worked as a member of the Tree Foundation over the last 7 years to make sure we increase that tree canopy.
Roger, question 4 is, what ideas do you have for revitalizing Del Paso Boulevard and business development in general?
This has got to be a major priority for whoever sits in the city council seat. It's bringing economic investment to our part of the city, where we have been disinvested in for far too long. With respect to Del Paso Boulevard, we have a great opportunity. We have not only light rail there to provide transportation, but we have the San Joaquin Valley Rail Authority, which is going to extend service to North Sacramento and on to Natomas in the next several years. That will give us an intercity rail connection to the south and to the Bay Area directly. Those transportation assets then can become the foundation for expanding investment into both housing and commercial and retail development. On Del Paso Boulevard, we have the opportunity for mixed-use development, where we have commercial or office uses on the street level and residential above it. When we build that housing, we also create more customers for businesses in our part of the city. So we can support our local businesses, which is critical, as well as bring in and attract new business. Those new customers need to get food. They need to go to the cleaners. They need to go to the bike shop, whatever services they may need. So that then creates more activity and more vibrancy to our part of the city. And we can apply this, by the way, to other parts of North Sacramento, not just El Paso Boulevard, to the Marysville and Grand Avenue area, to the Norwood area. We have economic opportunities around Interstate 80 in Robla, but we need someone who knows how to go out and attract that private investment, knows how to work with the investment community. That's why I've already begun with the city, as I mentioned earlier, to work on a financing technique that will help us pay for the infrastructure we need to lay the foundation to attract that private investment.
Stephen?
Can you repeat the question, please? I just want to make sure I answered in clarity.
What ideas do you have for revitalizing Del Paso Boulevard and business development in general?
So I think it's important to note the misses that we've had in the past decades. My opponent mentions an infrastructure financing district that was authored, or he helped to author, but never brought 10 years or 12 years earlier when it was an opportunity to do so. We've missed a lot of opportunity by not acting when it was time to act so we could build now. We're behind. And so as I have been doing for Del Paso Boulevard and Marysville Boulevard, I actually sit on the Community Advisor Council for the Forward Together project, which is with the city of Sacramento, and that's to revitalize a true action plan to revitalize that historic corridor. So I won't talk about what I will do. I'll talk about what I've been doing. I worked to bring 2 development groups to Del Paso Boulevard to revitalize and bring 150 units at one location, which is mixed-use retail, which is retail at the bottom, and then apartment, live workspaces on the top. And that is just one project. Another project, 75 units of mixed use as well, to come to actual Del Paso Boulevard. But then there's opportunities down further on Marysville Boulevard that have lacked investment and lack the opportunity to grow as well. And so what we need to do is we need to not only attract the developers to come, because we don't pass the eye test in a lot of ways. We need to make our streets safe and clean first and foremost to attract investment. And then on top of that, after we've done that, bring in the right type of careful developers to develop these properties on Del Paso Boulevard and Marysville Boulevard. Never want to leave out Marysville Boulevard and other commercial corridors like Norwood, like Relinda Boulevard. But we have to get infrastructure, which I advocated for at the state level, and we were able to bring $3.9 million in Green Means Gold funding to Del Paso Boulevard. We need another $8 million because we have an infrastructure study that says we need $12 million total, but we have to continue to work in detail at that level to do so, to bring in the proper investment.
Stephen, starting with you. District 2 is known to be one of the most underserved districts in the city. Sanitation is a human right and a public health concern. Out of 15 parks run by the city, only 5 have restrooms. Of those 5, only 1 toilet is operational. All others are closed. That is 10 parks in District 2 without any access to sanitation. As our council member, will you commit to providing public resources to fix the restrooms that are not functioning and keep them open for public use?
Yeah, I think it's important that we address the neglect on many levels, but especially in our parks in District 2. In fact, we often have they're the most under-resourced amenity in the district. And so absolutely we need to collaborate on every level possible to bring resources. And I understand that means working together at the federal level, which Congressman Ami Vera brought nearly $1 million to restore Johnston Park, which had been neglected for a long time in the community. And so in addition to that, we need to look at the bathrooms that need the most attention to immediately and get the resources to restore them, but then continue and put a strategy and plan together to address the other parks that have been completely neglected. In fact, the level of detail that we needs a leader that will put our hands in the dirt and actually do the work on a daily basis. And I say this because I stopped a couple of months ago and stopped just the service providers that actually take care of our parks, and noticed that one of our parks hadn't been addressed in 3 months. And so it takes that level of detail in real time to hold accountable how we're providing the service and how we're servicing the district, and that we're receiving the maintenance, that we're not having deferred maintenance, which has built up in District 2 for ages. So we have to make sure that we're catching the deferred maintenance or the lack of maintenance in real time. And I will continue to do that while working with the directors, but also working with the boots on the ground, so we don't get in the position that you just mentioned. We're so far behind that we need millions of dollars of investment. We can mitigate that by staying on top of it in real time. So that'll be the way I address it.
Roger?
I think absolutely we have to address the maintenance of our parks, especially in North Sacramento, in our part of the city. We have to make them accessible, usable, desirable, and safe for community members. And that means using funding sources that we may not have traditionally thought of for that purpose. So that could be something that comes out of some Measure L funding, for example. Now, we want to concentrate that funding on helping youth, to be sure. We want to invest in youth, but we also want to make our parks usable and accessible for our youth. So that's a possibility. We can use other sources of money from the state and federal funds. For example, Proposition 4, that will be on the November ballot for all of us to vote on, includes more than $100 million for community parks. If that passes, then we need to be aggressive about going after that money as the city of Sacramento. It can be a source for not just maintaining and improving and taking care of the maintenance of our parks, but expanding our parks. We need to look at the assets that our parks need. So, for example, when we look at Robla Community Park, it has needed a clubhouse for years and years, but it's never been a priority sufficient enough to get the funding necessary to build that clubhouse. That would be a significant addition and improvement for the park for the Robla community. And we need to think beyond just our parks, frankly, in terms of sanitation. We have far too much illegal dumping in our part of the city. And when I was a county supervisor, I used to go out in the unincorporated parts of my district and take a look and phone in to the county solid waste staff where I saw illegal dumping, so they would come out and pick it up, because we all know what happens if that illegal dumping is sustained over time. It just grows and grows. We need to make our community attractive, clean, and safe, and we can do it.
Roger, question 6, starting with you, is how do you plan to effectively meet the needs of all neighbors in District 2 with its different strengths and needs? What role would you play in advancing equity?
I think this is a critical question, because for far too long we have neighborhoods that have thought of themselves as being isolated or independent from others. We all sink or swim together in our part of the city. We have wonderful neighborhoods, but individually, we have relatively little strength in each of our neighborhoods. Collectively, we can have great strength. And it's what I've done for years as a county supervisor and in the state legislature, is brought people together, brought residents together, local businesses together, to define what it is they would like to see happen and then advocate for it. And we saw improvements throughout the districts I represented, in the unincorporated area in particular, but in the city as well, because we organized, mobilized, and then advocated. My opponent has said that he would divide and conquer the different neighborhoods. I think that's exactly the wrong approach. What we need to do is unify. We need to come together. We have so much in common. We have needs that span our district. We want to make sure that we attract the resources and the attention we need, and we will have the clout to do that when we unify. But we need to do that from the ground up. We need to work with community associations, with nonprofit organizations, with all the residents who want to participate in bringing a new day to our part of the city.
Stephen?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How do you plan to effectively meet the needs of all neighbors in District 2 with its different strengths and needs? What role would you play in advancing equity?
That's a very important question, vital to the community that has been neglected and under-resourced for far too long. So I won't talk about what I will do. I'll talk about what I've been doing, and that is going throughout the community, especially to the most underserved and resource areas like Strawberry Manors and Del Paso Heights, and working with residents to not only educate and inform, but to get them civically engaged to understand the power that we have when working together, and to provide how we work together in unity. In doing so, because our district is so large, which my opponent alluded to, we need to work in the area that we're in. So I want to make sure we're strategically working and using our energy in an efficient and effective manner. That means I want Strawberry Manors residents working on Strawberry Manors issues because they live there every day. And so it just makes common sense for them to be able to be tapped in, which many residents are not, because they don't see anything change and haven't seen things change for decades and decades. So it's important that we understand where we're at in our community and what work needs to be done in the immediate community we live in, but then also understand the opportunity, which I spoke of in a number of events, for us to come together on the key issues. And we need to be extremely strategic and intentional of how we work together to bring the resources back. And I believe in leadership by plurality, meaning having many leaders to work with, not just one voice, not just working above you, but actually working alongside you. This isn't a dictatorship in my book. This is a work in concert, a work in collaboration with the community, and that'll bring the equity that we really need to see in District 2.
Stephen, question 7 is, how can we reduce youth violence in District 2?
That's another question that really hits right home, because being a Del Paso Heights native, I understand the challenges that we face in that manner. And I'll talk about the work that I've been doing to address it already. I'm the only candidate that can go in either neighborhoods and have intimate relationships with those faced with these challenges. And so what the youth need, they need alternatives. They need programs that help them to have alternatives from either violence or going down the wrong path. And we don't. We've lost a lot of programming in that we've lost a lot of community centers. We only have Hagenwood Community Center operating as a city-run community center. We don't have the Robinson Center anymore. We don't have Johnston Community Center anymore. We don't have the Wood Lake Clubhouse that was taken away as well. So we need to bring back programming that will help to bring alternatives for the youth as well. In addition to that, there used to be a program called Upward Bound, which was sponsored by this Sacramento State. And a lot of youth in past were able to get to know other youth throughout the city and in the neighborhood by collaborating and working and learning together. We need to bring strong programs like that back, because they were effective in providing a pathway to an alternative style of life that was healthy and productive for the district. And that's what we need to do in District 2, make it readily available for District 2 residents and youth in the district.
Roger?
This, again, I think is a critical topic, not just for our part of the city, but for the city and the region as a whole. We need to invest more in early childhood development and youth development and provide alternatives. Every child should be able to dream of whatever they wish to do and have the opportunity to pursue those dreams if they're willing to work hard, without roadblocks and without barriers, but with support and with assistance. Over the years, I've been deeply involved in childhood development. I've served 10 years as the chair of Sacramento First 5. We funded Birth and Beyond, was one of our principal programs that helps at-risk families avoid children ending up in child abuse and neglect and CPS. I've worked with the Roberts Family Development Center and with Brother to Brother in our part of the city specifically, helping the Roberts Family Development Center establish itself in North Sacramento a number of years ago, working again with families and children to improve their lives, to give them that pathway. I've worked with our educational institutions, including both the Twin Rivers District and the Grant District, to make sure that we have kids on the right path and with positive alternatives. I established a coalition called Yes to Youth in order to provide positive alternatives to kids. I'm recognized as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action because of legislation and I carried in the legislature to reduce access to guns and what I did as a county supervisor. I authored legislation to address student discipline to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline, legislation that now is taking full effect. And I authored legislation to ban the box, meaning that those who apply for jobs who have been previously incarcerated are not asked on an initial job application whether they've been arrested or convicted, because that often led to them not even having a chance at a job. This is something I believe in deeply to the core and is one of my very top priorities.
Question 8. Sacramento's tenant protection program that caps annual rent increases at inflation plus 6% or a maximum of 10% expires at the end of the year. Do you support renewing this program? Why or why not? If extended, are there changes you would propose? Roger?
I do believe that the city should extend this program of tenant protection, and in fact, perhaps should revise it. The state law now is a maximum rent increase of inflation plus 5% or 10%. So I think that we could at least match the state requirements with respect to that kind of protection. But we also need to look further at making sure, especially as we attract economic investment to our part of the city, that we're not displacing those who have housing there now. So we can help protect those who are tenants in the places they live and make sure that through things such as just cause requirements for evictions, through potentially a first right of refusal to purchase a building, through community land trusts, which are now becoming a vehicle for acquiring land and building affordable housing. We can go after more in the way of state and federal funds. And by the way, we need to be on the ballot here in Sacramento in 2026 to find the financing to help expand our housing supply. All those things, if we can do them, especially expanding our housing supply, will help moderate increases in prices and increases in rents. We also need to make sure that the places that people live are safe and meet the standard of habitability required under state law. We have too many people in our district who have a place to live, but it's not livable. So we need to make sure that the city is aggressive in its program to inspect apartments, inspect rental properties, make sure that they meet the standard of habitability so that they are livable as well as places to live in.
Stephen?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. Sacramento's tenant protection program that caps annual rent increases at inflation plus 6% or a maximum of 10% expires at the end of the year. Do you support renewing this program? Why or why not? If extended, are there changes you would propose?
I do support the tenant protection program and renewing it. I think it's important to note that we want to keep people housed in the district and in the city. We want to make sure people keep a roof over their head. And in addition to that, I've learned with this program that we haven't really truly educated tenants as well as housing providers on the protections that are in this program. So I think we can do a better job of actually getting the information to the community so we can stay protected in that manner and nothing's violated on either side, especially as it relates to protecting tenants. I also think we need to work with the professionals that want to build in the district to increase housing supply. We need to remove the red tape because we really have a housing shortage, and that's really the issue that we face. We need to produce more housing, but in order to do so, we need to make it more easily accessible to do so and not providing all the red tape to do so for people that actually want to invest in the area. Also, we need to do preventative measures for residents that are facing challenges so they don't risk losing their housing. And that comes once again with education and information on the resources that are out there. And what I found in the district while talking to thousands of people in the district is that oftentimes they just don't know the resources that are out there. And so we want to make sure they're educated and informed, especially about the tenant protection program, but also on top of that, about the state bills that help with protection as well, such as AB 1482. And so it's about really educating the people and making sure they're aware, and then also providing the resources and making it accessible for them as well. We have to keep people housed, or we continue to add to this crisis. And so we want to make sure, I want to be clear that we want to make sure that we provide the resources, but also the accessibility to the information that'll keep people housed.
Question 9. With the new growth in District 2, infrastructure and parks have moved to the front of critical need. Is this on your agenda, and will you prioritize a funding source? Stephen?
Absolutely. Like I said in one of the previous questions, I actually advocated at the state level for infrastructure funds to help repair Del Paso Boulevard. That we need in real time. Some of the stuff that's proposed by my opponent, we need, but it's going to take a long time for it to take place. And for a place that has been so disinvested or underinvested in, we need to see change in real time. We can't afford to wait for another decade to see transformative change. So we need to be very aggressive, and like I did, going to the Capitol, going to the federal level, and to receive funds for infrastructure updates. We absolutely have to push for this, and that is why I tell people our votes and our engagement matters, because we need to all be advocating for this infrastructure updates. The city of North Sac, which used to be the city of North Sac, old North Sac, has been underinvested in for decades. Our infrastructure needs millions of dollars to be updated. So we have to be aggressive for getting these infrastructure updates, not only on Del Paso Boulevard, but also on Marysville Boulevard, on Norwood, on Rio Linda Boulevard as well as other corridors inside the district. We have to have a strategic plan that goes after, that's supported by the community, so our voice can be heard and we can receive the resources that we rightfully deserve.
Roger?
I'm delighted that Stephen has been to the Capitol to advocate for funding for Green Means Go. I actually was the lead proponent of the program that established the blueprint for our area that led to Green Means Go. I've also, as I mentioned earlier, been already working with the City Council and with the city staff and established what's called an Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District for our part of the city, or an EIFD, based on legislation that I co-authored when I was in the Assembly, that will allow us to capture the growth in property tax funds and devote them to infrastructure investment in our part of the city. And by the way, when we do that, we aren't stuck with waiting 10 years. We can go out and bond against that money for early money. We can also go out and seek federal and state money that becomes available when we have a local match for the programs such as the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program at the state level, or the Sustainable Communities Affordable Housing Program at the state level. We have funding that we can seek through the through the Investment Infrastructure Bipartisan Act from Congress, and from the Deficit Reduction Act, also passed by Congress. Those are enormous sources potentially for money if we're aggressive about it, if we have the relationships to go get it. And that's why I'm so pleased to have the endorsement of both Congressman Ami Bera and Congresswoman Doris Matsui, because I've worked with them for so long on getting these kinds of things done. Just this past year, I was one of the lead proponents on legislation AB 930 that would allow us to tap a state revolving fund for catalyst projects in areas around transit, major transit stops. So that legislation this year wasn't successful, but hopefully we'll get there in the coming years. And increasing housing, I've been the one who's been working on that legislation that's been successful over the past 5 years to allow us to build more housing more quickly.
Our final question is, many District 2 residents have lost trust and confidence in council representatives based on harm, whether real or perceived, by previous representatives. How will you rebuild relationships, transparency, and confidence? Roger?
I think that is an important question, because in order to be successful, we have to restore confidence and trust in what the city does. Now, we've had the unfortunate, to say the least, experience in our last two representatives of people who have found other priorities, and they have not placed the residents and constituents of the district first. That changes. That changes with election to the city council if I'm successful. And I will do what I have always done, which is go out, make sure I'm accessible, and don't sit in an office. You have to go out and meet with people, and you have to invite people in. You have to start a conversation first. You have to begin to listen. It's what I've done throughout my elected career, and even before that in other public service. You have to then take what people tell you and mold it into something that is workable, that you can help them and help your district accomplish. It's what I have, again, always done as elected representative. It's why we have light rail in North Sacramento, for example, because we listened to people who said we need major transportation assets here. It wasn't originally going to go through North Sacramento, but it does, because we listened to people, made sure that that's what we did. It's why we have the opportunity to do tangible things that people can see. I've done that, again, throughout my career in making sure that as we listen to people, then we accomplish the things that they find most important, that add and improve their communities. When you show that you're listening and you follow what people are interested in, then people will respond, I think, quite favorably, and we can restore trust and confidence. We can do much better.
Stephen?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Many District 2 residents have lost trust and confidence in council representatives based on harm, whether real or perceived, by previous representatives. How will you rebuild relationships, transparency, and confidence?
It's a very important question to an area that has experienced a lot of trauma, especially in the past 4 years. I don't need to rebuild trust because I already have a lot of relationships in the community, with my family being in the district nearly 90 years, me being a Grant alumni and serving the community in the community with relationship with current leaders. It's important that I utilize those relationships that already are established and utilize not just my voice, but their voices as well. I believe in, once again, leadership by plurality. And that's how you continue the trust, because there are trusted leaders in the district and in the community I've been working with and will continue to work with and lean on them, and we'll continue to expand that message of how we bring back resources and integrity to the community. It starts with the people. It starts with dealing directly with the people and the people they trust and who we trust as a community together. And so we have to be very intentional of how we message and transparent how we do things in the community that has been underserved and really willfully neglected for decades. And so that's how we build the trust, continue to build the trust, but we act upon the trust that we already have. And we have a rich community with rich history, with a lot of amazing folks. So we have to tap into that source and continue to tap into it and build up on that. And that's how we'll continue to build, because we have to put people first and not politics first. And that's what the people haven't felt in a long time. I'm here to make sure we put the people first. I'm a neighborhood guy. I'm not a career politician. I could care less about the title. I want to see our community return back to a healthy and whole level. And the only way to do that is acting and working in concert with the people.
1 minute closing statements will begin with Stephen Walton.
I think it's important to understand why would anyone run for this position, especially myself? Why I would run for this? Because my family and its roots in the district, and hearing all the amazing stories of how we once were thriving and how we once had all the resources a healthy neighborhood has. And then I'm 43 years old and hearing these stories for decades growing up and never seeing it shows that there was a huge gap in what we needed at a city level. I want to be clear that experience and institutional knowledge does not mean effective leadership. I offer effective leadership that is proven. I've been doing it my whole life throughout, and anything I've ever done is with excellence. and the willingness to work all the way through. That's what I will bring to the table, is working with the people all the way through until the job is done.
We will now hear a 1-minute closing statement from Roger Dickinson.
Well, again, thanks to the League for hosting this and to Metro Cable for 14. You know, in our part of the city, we have historic neighborhoods. We have great organizations such as the Mutual Assistance Network and the Urban League and so many others. We have resilient local businesses. We have enormous potential. What we haven't had is good and necessary and thoughtful and knowledgeable leadership. We have great potential in our part of the city. And for me, there's always only been one interest, and that's the public interest. What we don't have is the luxury of time. We don't have time to continue to educate ourselves and learn about what needs to be done or where the resources are. We need to have the relationships, the knowledge, the expertise, and the capability of bringing the resources and attention to our part of the city now. It is time for us to do better. We can do better, and we should and must start building a brighter future today.
That concludes our forum. Thank you, candidates, for running for elected office and being here today to answer questions from voters.
Thank you.
Ballots go out in the mail next week. You can find your ballot online and nonpartisan voter information about the candidates and ballot propositions at vote411.org. You can mail in your ballot, no stamp required, or put it in a secure drop box, or vote in person anywhere in the county. Dropbox and in-person voting locations will be listed in the pink envelope with your ballot. A YouTube link to the recording will be available at our website, lwvsacramento.org. Thank you, League volunteers, and the wonderful team here at Sacramento Metro Cable Television. Have a beautiful day.